Okay, happy Monday, everybody. So, you can tell by the title, you have an idea of what I'm going to do right here. So, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be naming NFL, NBA players, current and past, randomly off the top of my head. And if people want to come in and post a comment in the chat asking me about a certain player, present or past, you're more than welcome to, and I'll answer for you what my verdict is between underrated, properly rated, or overrated. So I'm going to be on here for a little bit. Just going to take my time. I have a little fun with this right here. And like I said, you guys coming in, you can also feel free to ask me if you feel a certain player is over, underrated, whatever the case may be. So with that being said, I'm ready to dive into this. So let's get to it. So first one that comes to mind is Alex Smith. Alex Smith, former 49ers, Chiefs, and Commanders quarterback. When you look back at his career as a whole and how people talk about him, I'm going to say overrated because, yes, Alex Smith, he ended up having a respectable career, but some people tend to talk about how, especially who's running Kansas City, I feel that's specifically overrated when it comes to Alex Smith's career because a lot of people talk about that run, about how he was good. They talk about him like he was close to the Manning, Brady, or Rodgers level, which that's not the case, especially when you look back on now, because look at where Kansas City was with Alex Smith versus where they're at now with Mahomes. I mean, Smith had a respectable run, but if they truly had an elite quarterback, they could have took off years before that. Because notice where they went from with Alex Smith to a good regular season team that can't get past the hump to all of a sudden now 3 Super Bowl wins and 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 wins in 5 seasons under Patrick Mahomes. So I think his run there in Kansas City makes him a little bit overrated. So I'm going to call Alex Smith slightly overrated. Respectable career, but slightly a little bit overrated. So next one, Shawn Kemp. Shawn Kemp was a pretty good power forward for the Seattle Supersonics in the 90s. No, I mean, he wasn't. Now, was he on the level of, say, guys like Shaq, Patrick Ewing, or Keem Olajuwon? No, he was not on their level. He was not. But Shawn Kemp was a pretty good big man his era. And he's, in terms of big men from that era, he's kind of forgotten about a little bit. So I'm going to say Shawn Kemp was a little bit underrated because when you talk about big men in the 90s, he sometimes gets lost in the discussion. Now, obviously, he wasn't on the level as a Shaq, Ewing, or David Robinson or Akeem, but he was still a pretty good big man that gets lost in the discussion of good or great big men in the 90s. So I'll have to say he's a little bit underrated. So the next one, LaDainian Tomlinson. That obviously, I'd say he's properly rated. He's one of the best running backs of his era. Great modern day back. He's inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So LT definitely say that he is properly rated for his career. Next person that comes to mind is let's see, Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing, one of the all-time great big men, considered an all-time great player that never won a championship. Obviously, I'd say properly rated. Next one comes to mind, Lamar Odom. Now, Lamar Odom isn't the biggest name in the history of the NBA, obviously. He's not someone that you looked at as an all-time great big man, but Lamar Odom was, here's the thing a lot of people don't realize about him. He was a key contributor to all those Lakers championship runs during the Kobe era. And Lamar Odom played a role in helping teams be better. He was a solid role player. So I think Lamar Odom's low-key underrated and forgotten about. So I consider him low-key underrated. So the next one is former 49er, former Brown, former Lion, former Eagle, former Buccaneer quarterback Jeff Garcia. Remember, Jeff Garcia started as a walk-on. He ended up being the replacement for Steve Young with the Niners for a few years. He helped them get to the playoffs a few times. Then he had a forgettable year with the Browns and with the Lions. Did he play at all? Did he start at all with the Lions that one year? But one forgettable year at the Browns, one forgettable year at the Lions. Helped lead the Eagles to the playoffs in the 06 season after McNabb tore his ACL. And then he helped lead the Bucs in 07. So a respectable career. Was he great? Not even close. But was he a respectable quarterback? Yes, he's a pretty solid arm. He could move a little bit for a guy, And he started late, which, pretty good run for a guy that started late. So I'd consider Jeff Garcia low-key underrated. I mean, he's not in the Hall of Fame or any of that, but, he's a respectable quarterback. So I'll consider him low-key underrated. Next one, Luka Doncic. Luka, obviously, he's the star player for the Dallas Mavericks. He's broken out as someone who could potentially be the next face of the NBA. And, obviously, Luka's done everything you can expect from a player of his stature early in his career, except win a championship. But Luka's obviously still got time. It could still happen. Mavs could still put together the right pieces, and possibly Luka could win a championship someday. But so far, where Luka stands as of now, he's properly rated as one of the top players in a possible future face in the NBA. So I'd say properly rated as of now. Next one that comes to mind is Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman. Under, over, or properly? Now, Rodman, obviously, we know him for his personality, his different hair colors, his crazy behavior off the court, especially his partying lifestyle. We all know about that with Dennis Rodman and his bizarre friendship with Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. As far as Dennis Rodman as a player, a lot of people forget some of the contributions he made throughout his career because he was a contributing player to 2 different championship teams. He was a contributor to the Bad Boy Pistons with Isaiah Thomas in the late 80s. And then Rodman was a contributing factor to the Bulls, the later stages of the Bulls dynasty. So Dennis Rodman, people forget that he really helped some of those teams out. And plus, he was helped the Spurs out in the mid-90s alongside David Robinson. Now, obviously, it didn't work out in the long term with those two as teammates due to personality clashes, but on the court, they were still a pretty good team. Even though they didn't win anything with Rodman, they started winning when Tim Duncan got there. But hey, the Spurs, man, Rodman was a contributing factor there too. So I gotta say, Rodman, I think, is a little bit underrated now because a lot of people like to forget about how good he was as a player. They focus more on this personality and his bizarre behavior in recent years, more so than how good he actually was as a player. So I think historically, he's a little bit underrated. So, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. As of right now, especially with Brady out of the way, especially the way Brady played last season, even if he does come back, his ceiling is going to be the lowest it's been. But long story short, Patrick Mahomes is now considered the face of the NFL as far as quarterbacks goes, and rightfully so. In 5 seasons as a starter, 5 conference championship games, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Now, maybe the first one you could argue should have been Damian Williams that won the MVP, but that's another story for another time. But hey, so far, those accolades right there back up him being the best quarterback currently. So I'd say Patrick Mahomes, properly rated. Brett Favre. Now, we know he's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in Packers history, alongside Rodgers and Starr. Whatever order you want to put those 3 in, That's up to you. But yeah, we all know that 3-time regular season MVP. He was one of the great quarterbacks of the 90s alongside Troy Aikman, Steve Young. But also, let's not forget, especially in the 2000s, Favre, he had some regular seasons where he really wasn't that spectacular. Now, I get that by the 2000s he was getting older. That plays a factor too. But let's not forget, Brett Favre had a habit of just recklessly throwing interceptions. I mean, some people call Brett Favre the greatest quarterback to never learn to read the defense, which is true. So, and when you look at specifically Favre versus Rodgers comparison, Rodgers, I think, did better than Favre overall. People like to knock Rodgers for only having one Super Bowl win, but same goes with Brett Favre too. So, kind of balances out there with those two. But I'm going to say Brett Favre's a little bit overrated. Because, yeah, is he a Hall of Famer? Of course, absolutely. Just from a strictly player standpoint alone. But Brett Favre had a habit of just making a bunch of reckless decisions with the football. And that played a role in costing the Packers some big games throughout the years. So, yeah, I'm going to have to consider him a bit overrated. So, moving right along. Randall Cunningham. Now, there was a discussion going on around the fall last year whether or not Cunningham should be considered for the Hall of Fame. Now, Randall Cunningham, he was an exciting player. Certainly, he was like the original Michael Vick in terms of style of play. He could run with it. He could make some exciting highlight reel plays similar to Vick, and he could throw the ball too. So, Randall Cunningham was a good all-around talent. And people like to knock Randall for some of the playoff losses and the Eagles only getting so far, but really think about the same time. To be fair, I think that in part has to do with the fact that he didn't have the greatest supporting cast around him on offense. And here's why I say that, because you remember when he retired for a year in '97, he came back in '98 with the Vikings. He had Robert Smith as his running back, Chris Carter, rookie Randy Moss. Remember, that was his best season. So and that was in the later stages of his career. I think personally, you look back at what he did in '98, and you're thinking, if Cunningham had that type of supporting cast with the Eagles offensively in his earlier years, imagine how great he could have been. So I think Randall Cunningham's a bit underrated when you look back on it. 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I just had to have a sip of water real quickly. Now I'm back at it. So I'm gonna continue with my overrated, underrated, or properly rated NFL or NBA, present or past. So I'm just coming up with random names that come to mind and going with that. And if you guys coming in want to post a comment in the comments asking me about a certain player, whether I think they're over or underrated, you're more than welcome to. I'll answer that question for you. So it'll be a combination of me going off the top of my head with random players and some of you guys in the comments giving me your athletes on who you want me to answer for, whether they're over or underrated. So yeah, it's either names that come off the top of my head or names you ask me about in the comments. So let's get to it. Continuing, Rich Gannon. Now, Rich Gannon was a late bloomer, player who started to get hot late in his career. think he was 99 to 2002. He had a nice run there with the Raiders, but yeah, so it's like, but at the same time, look at the rest of Rich Gannon's career. What did he do outside of that that was so special outside of that run late in his career? Yeah, right, when Gannon was there in the 90s. You guys remember him in Minnesota? Nah, probably not. Remembering in Washington? Probably not. He's remembered for his run with the Raiders, which was a good run, mind you. But it was only a short run, and outside of that, he didn't do anything at all. So I'd say Rich Gannon is overrated because, yes, nice run with the Raiders, but outside of that, what did he do? And some people even consider this guy a potential Hall of Famer. Like, wait a minute, hold on. Raiders Ring of Honor inductee, absolutely, but Pro Football Hall of Famer for a couple good years late in his career? No. That's why I say he's overrated. So, next one. LeBron James. This could be a tough one to answer because depends on your perspective. Use mixed, now pretty much everyone's going to agree that he's one of the top 5 great players to play the game. You're going to have different opinions as to where he ranks among those top 5. But I think, yeah, top 5 players of all time, that's proper place to put him. So I'll say since generally he averages being ranked in the top 5 of all time by people, I'd say LeBron's properly rated for that. Now, it just depends on who you ask where you'd rank him in the list, but that's another discussion for another time. So let's moving right along. Now, Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons. Okay, so a few years ago I would have said overrated, but I think now more people are realizing he's not the answer. So I'd say as of now, February 27, 2023, Ben Simmons is properly rated. Okay. I'm going to clip that one into a shorter video. So, now next favorite player that comes to mind, PJ Tucker. As of right now, a lot of people ain't even really talking about the guy. He's kind of just, he was a role player. He's a decent role player, but now he's not doing anything at this point in his career. So it's tough because you could, the easy thing is to say underrated because you're going to say, okay, some people are only going to look at this year and forget about what he actually did in his career before the 76ers. But I guess, I mean, I'll say maybe he's, yeah, as of this moment, a little bit underrated because we're so caught up in how bad he is with the Sixers, we forget he actually had a respectable career outside of that. Now, next one, Kwame Brown. Kwame Brown. Properly rated. A bust. Yep, absolutely. I mean, respectable numbers, but when you're the number 1 pick, you're supposed to produce much better than what he did. So, yeah, he's properly rated as a bust. Next. Tony Parker. This is an interesting one right there for all-time NBA point guards because he pans out to have a good career with the Spurs, but ultimately Tony Parker did have to play in the shadow of Tim Duncan throughout a lot of his career. And, he's always going to get credited for having to play under Popovich as a big part of his success. So I do, but to be fair, Tony Parker did eventually start to excel. It took him a little bit of time to catch on, but he turned out to be a respectable point guard. So I'll have to consider Tony Parker a little bit underrated because a lot of people give credit to Duncan and Popovich for that. And they sleep on Tony Parker a little bit. So, say a little bit underrated. Next one. Former New Orleans Saint, Miami Dolphin, and Baltimore Raven running back Ricky Williams. So, Ricky Williams obviously had a pretty good career. He was a big star in college at Texas, and he came into the NFL. He had a nice run there. He had a few Pro Bowl nods. He's most remembered for his run with the Dolphins. And, he had a pretty good run. Now, he did miss a few years due to his drug problems and he had injuries issues as well. He missed the 04, 05, 06 seasons with the NFL. He came back in 07. He got injured. And then 2008, 2009, 2010. He had a few respectable seasons there as a number 2 back, but respectable nonetheless. But I mean, Ricky Williams, but he had a good run as a starter, but eventually he got demoted to being a second string back due to his issues off the field. But a lot of that I think is a bit ridiculous looking back on, but especially being that it was only marijuana, but that's another issue. I mean, Ricky Williams, people respect him as a running back, but they say, hey, good run, but not enough to be a Hall of Famer. I'd say Ricky Williams was properly rated. He's properly rated as a good running back. Next one that comes to mind, Russell Wilson. Now, people consider Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer one day down the line. When you look at his career as a whole, yes, he is. Now, obviously, as of now, he's fallen off. His best years are behind him, but hey, Russell Wilson was a good quarterback for the Seahawks, even great quarterback for the Seahawks. He helped keep that team relevant longer than they had any business being relevant. Even as the Legion of Boom started to get older, Russell helped still keep that team relevant. So I'm going to have to say Russell Wilson, as of now, with all the talks of being a future Hall of Famer, is properly rated. Josh McCown. Oh, gosh. So, the ultimate journeyman. He played with close to half the league throughout his career. Pretty much as a backup, would somehow weasel his way into playing time everywhere he went. He'd maybe occasionally have a good game in his career, but he never did anything spectacular. So Josh McCown's considered the ultimate journeyman, which sounds about right. So I consider him properly rated. Kirk Cousins. Obviously, with the Vikings, a lot of fans, they don't see him as the guy that can pan out in the long, as the right guy. They remember in Washington, he didn't pan out as the guy. And really, with the Vikings, he's not really the guy. And he puts up some nice numbers at times. You'll get a few good games out of a guy like Cousins. I mean, he's a game manager, but he's not a true star quarterback. So I think Kirk Cousins I think he's properly rated as a serviceable QB, but not someone that's really going to take you anywhere big. So I think serviceable sounds about right. Who are some other names? Trying to think of some other names randomly. NFL and NBA. Derrick Rose. Youngest MVP in NBA history. Had the greatest start to a career you could have asked, and only for it to come crashing down with one major injury that altered his career, which led to an unfortunate career plagued with injuries. He was never truly able to get back to that level again. So I'd say Derrick Rose, who has the reputation of being the biggest what could have been in NBA history, properly rated as the biggest what could have been in NBA history. And speaking of Derrick Rose, let's start with another player who was drafted by the Chicago Bulls, who's still in the NBA. This is Jimmy Butler. Now, Jimmy Butler, obviously, people like his story. This is the NBA version of The Blind Side. Obviously, got to respect that story, the fact that he was able to overcome all that and get to where he is. Now he is a star for the Miami Heat, but there have been a lot of people consider Jimmy Butler a superstar. They try to rank him up there with the likes of the LeBrons of the world, along with Joel Embiid's of the world, the Lukas. I don't see it. I see him as an all-star player. Now, he might go on a tear come playoff time. If Jimmy Butler could maybe win a championship or two with some good playoff runs, that could change the narrative, my narrative on him. But ultimately, we'll have to see. As of right now, I just consider him an all-star who might put together a good playoff run and get them close, but not quite going to get them over the hump as the leading player of the team and become a championship team. So I consider Jimmy Butler a little bit overrated. So trying to think of some more names. I'm running a little bit low with names right here. If you guys are in here and you're in the comments, you can try to comment, ask me about a player I haven't mentioned yet. Just mention any NBA or NFL player, current or past, and I'll answer for you whether I feel they're over, under, or properly rated. So, because I'm starting to run a little bit low on names right now. See, Tim Duncan, considered the greatest power forward in NBA history, had a dominant run with the San Antonio Spurs, was there for all 5 of their championship wins. He was the face of that franchise there under Popovich. First ballot NBA Hall of Famer. I'm definitely considering Tim Duncan properly rated. Karl Malone. Okay, as a player, considered one of the all-time great power forwards to never play on the championship winning team. Sounds right, properly rated. So let's try to end on a more positive note. Try to come up with one more name on this. Archie Manning, the dad of Peyton and Eli Manning. With the narrative on his career is if he had gone to a better team and a better starting situation, he could have been an all-time great. Me personally, I think that's a load right there. I don't believe at all that he could have been one of the all-time greats. Yeah, he would have had a better all-around career. His career would have been reflected better, but I don't think he would have been an all-time great with a better situation. So, yeah, he put up some pretty good numbers considering what he had to deal with there, but I still don't think he would have been an all-time great elsewhere. So, I'd say Archie Manning's overrated. So that's where I'm going to end this right here. I might do another over, under, or properly rated at some point, similar to this, a part 2. But I decided to come on here, just try something a little different here with this live stream today. So that's what I did right there. So to everyone that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, drop a like and feel free to leave a comment. Even if you're catching this afterward, you can leave a comment in the comment section. Yeah, so thanks for tuning in. And until next time, it's Nicky Stees signing off.